Hey guys, it's Nephis here, and today we're going to be talking about a very strong, potentially very overpowered skill that a lot of people in raids have started using. It's getting a lot of traction and a lot more attention, so I figured with all these questions coming to me, I figured I would answer some of them about the skill. So the skill we're going to be overviewing today is the Shadow Silk skill, and this is the morph version of the Trapping Web skill of the Undaunted skill line. Now, a lot of people are using this, and it's not just stamina DPS using it, it's also Magicka DPS who are supporting the stamina DPS, and I'll explain more on that later, and it's also healers using it, it's also tanks using it, and pretty much it can be used for almost everywhere in every fight. Now we're going to be going over how it works, how much damage it actually does, potentially with raid buffs, and pretty much we're going to be dissecting the skill in this video. And it's going to be a very powerful skill to use for quite some time in the future, because I believe ZeniMax, the combat team, was asked about if it's performing correctly, because it's such a strong skill to have in the raid team, even potentially a 4-man, but that hasn't really been tested yet. But it's such a strong skill and such a strong synergy that does so much damage and so much DPS, in fact, that the combat team was actually asked if it was intended, and they actually said yes, it is intended. The skill is not really a great skill to cast for one person, but it is working as intended. The numbers are correct, so I expect this skill to probably stay around for quite some time. On the tooltip, Shadow Silk says, hurl webs to ensnare your foes, reducing the movement speed of enemies in the area by 50%. Obviously this will not affect bosses or elite mobs. After 5 seconds the webs explode, dealing X amount of poison damage to enemies within. So it has a delay, it's a snare, and for 5 seconds it will just snare, and then after 5 seconds everything will explode and deal X amount of poison damage. Now it's pretty low on this character because it's a Magicka character, keep that in mind. A ranged ally targeting an enemy in the webs can activate the Black Widow synergy, dealing X amount of poison damage to them and summoning 2 spiders to attack for 15 seconds. The spiders that are spawned bite enemies for X amount of physical damage and can poison them for X amount of poison damage over 10 seconds. Now, there's a lot of questions that I need to sort of review for this skill, and the first thing that came up to my mind was, well, what is a ranged ally? What does that mean? What exactly is the distance you need to activate it, and how well does this skill really scale in raid, or potentially in raid? So we're going to be answering that in this video. Now, as you can see in this video, we are testing the range on how far we have to be away from the location of the skill to synergize the Shadow Silk synergy. Now, as you saw, I was quite far away and I was able to synergize the Shadow Silk synergy. I put this one down and the other player cannot synergize my synergy because he's too close. So what exactly is the exact distance, I suppose, to synergize it? And as you just saw, we are going to be testing it here. Now, the distance required to synergize Shadow Silk is actually going to be about around 10 to 12 meters in game, and that's actually a little bit shorter than the length of your wall of elements as a mag DPS for reference. So it is actually a shorter distance than your wall, as we'll be showing here. And yep, from where the other player is standing, you can synergize the spiders. And that's how we pretty much determined what the distance is required, the minimum distance required. And obviously, as you can see from the distance required, this skill can definitely be used in a lot of trash fights in trials, and definitely some boss fights especially. Now here I'm going to show you guys the max distance at which you can synergize the Shadow Silk synergy. It's going to be 28 meters. That's how far away you can put poison injection on the target. As you'll see here, we put the synergy down and he was able to synergize the Shadow Silk. And it's pretty ridiculous, the distance. But again, this sort of plays into the whole bow and bow builds out there. And here we're testing how it scales off of your stats and your gear and such. And one thing we also learned is that the synergy, the skill, Shadow Soak must be touching a target in order for you to synergize it. It's not like Conduit, where you can just synergize it off of the ground when it's not hitting anything. And as I'll show you guys here, the results from testing a variable versus non-variable for the DPS scaling is going to be very interesting here. Now, as you guys see here, we have 3 components to the Shadow Silk skill. The first component is the burst damage you get, and it's called Black Widows in combat metrics when you synergize the Shadow Silk synergy, and it's a shit ton of DPS and a shit ton of burst damage. Now, the other 2 components to this skill is Bite and Poison. So the bite occurs when the spiders spawn and they keep biting at the target. The poison is also the dot that erupts when you synergize it. But the main point here is this skill is pretty layered in terms of damage. And as you can see from this parse, well not parse, but from this example with 3 Bloodthirsty as the constant variable where you don't get any damage boost and there's no buff or anything, the synergy base damage is still pretty good. And here in this next parse we have 3 infused, so we have more weapon damage, and since it has higher base damage on the synergy, the bites, and the poison, we've confirmed that the synergy definitely scales off your stats, including your max stats and your weapon damage and so on, and also the buffs you get, as we'll see later on with these next 2 parses. This parse here you guys are looking at, we had fun with it. We applied Horn, made sure Minor Berserk was up, AY stacks, but this is still with 3 Bloodthirsty on the dummy that was not in Execute, and pretty much it's a huge increase in synergy damage, and it's pretty insane the more we go. And the next parse we're going to look at is going to be with 3 Infused, so again another boost, and as you can see, the damage has gone up quite significantly, and in raid this has potential to go even much higher. In fact, from the other people's combat metrics I've been seeing that have been using the Shadow Silk synergy in raids, the max hit on the Black Widow synergy alone can hit upwards of 45,000, and that was probably not even with full buffs that could boost your Shadow Silk synergy even more, like more Octong, Powerful Assault. And if we consider all the buffs we have in place, and the debuffs even, Alkosh, Crusher, Minor Force, Major Force, and so on, this synergy is pretty badass, pretty OP. So you guys can see where I'm going with this. And going back to what I said at the beginning of the video, as for who runs this synergy, who runs this skill, it can be every single one in the raid. For specific trash fights or for specific boss fights, every single person has the potential to give this hard-hitting synergy to everybody else. So it is a pretty awesome, powerful skill, very powerful synergy for pretty much almost every situation, in trials at least. And I would say this is definitely going to become meta, for sure. Now, to end this video with a few more interesting facts about the Shadow Silk synergy and how it works, I was very curious about how the targeting works, because that's a huge issue in the Elder Scrolls Online. A lot of skills have targeting issues. Shadow Silk synergy, it seems, is very peculiar in choosing what target. If you just randomly look at the synergy and you don't really have any target selected, the spiders have a very random chance of going to whichever target they want. But if you tap target let's say in this video, as I'm going to show you, if you tap target the left dummy and you activate the synergy, the spiders will actually go to the right dummy. If you tap target the right dummy and activate the synergy, the spiders will actually go to your left side. And as you just saw, he heavy attack with the bow, just to make sure they're not like normal pets. And here, as you can see, he tap targeted the left dummy and then went to the right dummy. So I have no idea how this could be useful. Definitely it's up to the group to like make sure it's a very single targetable fight. I don't think there's any point to really go through the hassle of making sure you tap target and add in a boss fight and then use a synergy. I think either way, you're going to be doing a lot of damage as a DPS, whether you cast a synergy, and then the spiders go to a random ad next to the boss. The poison dot will still be there, and the initial hit from the synergy, which is a huge damage boost, is gonna ideally hit both the ad and the boss anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much about the targeting issues here. And just to sort of test some other stuff out with the targeting from Shadow Silk synergy, we knew that you needed the synergy to be on target for you to synergize it. But what happened if you aggro another target after throwing the synergy? Surprisingly, the spiders can aggro to that target after it has been casted, after the skill has been casted on other targets. So technically, you don't necessarily need to have this skill hit the target that's aggro late. It can actually have a high chance of going to that target, in fact. So, yep, that is pretty much it for this video, guys. That is Shadow Silk explained, reviewed, dissected. We'll probably be seeing a lot of spiders in rain, so if you have arachnophobia, then I guess it's over.